I want to tell you about a man named Gerald Potts. Not because he was remarkable, he wasn't. He was the kind of man you forget 30 seconds after meeting. Medium height, thinning hair the color of wet sand. The kind of man who brought the same egg salad sandwich to work every single day for 11 years without once getting tired of it. Gerald worked the night shift at a water treatment facility out on Millhaven Road. You know the kind of place. Chain link fence, sodium lights, the low hum of industrial machinery that you stop hearing after the first week. He was the only one there between midnight and 6. Just Gerald, a thermos of coffee, and 400 acres of filtration tanks. He liked it that way. That's the thing about Gerald people got wrong. They assumed he was lonely. He wasn't. He was the kind of person who needed the quiet the way some people need sunlight. He had a system. He'd do his rounds, check the pressure gauges, log the chemical levels, walk the perimeter, and then he'd sit in the monitoring room with a crossword and a true crime podcast and wait for morning. He'd done it for 6 years without incident, until February. February 3rd, specifically, a Tuesday. Temperatures had dropped to 11 below the night before, and the trees along the eastern fence line had that brittle glass chime quality they get when everything is frozen solid. Gerald arrived at 11:45, parked his truck in the usual spot, and noticed immediately that the floodlight over Tank 7 was out. That was the light that covered the far end of the eastern walkway, the long one, 300 meters of metal grating over open water. He logged it, radioed in a maintenance request, and thought nothing more about it. He did his first rounds, all gauges normal, chemical levels holding. He walked the perimeter with his flashlight, cutting pale circles into the dark, and he thought about the crossword clue he hadn't been able to crack last night. 7 letters, what the forgotten carry. He was halfway down the eastern walkway when he heard it. A sound. Not the machinery. He knew the machinery, the way you know your own heartbeat. This was different. A soft, rhythmic impact, like something wet being dragged across the metal grating, ahead of him, in the dark where the floodlight was out. He stopped. He shone his flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. Just the walkway, just the black water below on either side, just barely moving, just the cold. Gerald had worked alone for 6 years. He knew all the sounds a place makes when it thinks no one is listening. He knew the way pipes groan and cables hum and metal contracts in extreme cold. He cataloged every sound this facility made, and he had never heard that one. He stood there for a moment. Then he turned around and walked back. He told himself it was the cold playing tricks. Sound moves strangely at 11 below. He radioed it in anyway, possible animal on the eastern walkway, and he meant to think nothing more about it. But he found himself unable to concentrate on the crossword. By 2:30 a.m., he was on his 3rd coffee. He had the monitors up. The facility had cameras, 6 of them, though 3 were offline pending maintenance. The eastern walkway camera was one of the working ones, but it only covered the first 100 meters. Past that, darkness. At 2:47, the camera showed something. It was at the very edge of the frame, right at the border of what the camera could see, and it was... He squinted at the screen. It was upright, human-shaped, standing completely still. Gerald picked up the radio. Then he put it back down. He stared at the screen. Whatever it wasn't moving. It was just standing there at the edge of the light, facing the camera, or facing his direction. He couldn't make out a face. The image quality was poor, the light was bad, and whatever it was just standing, still as a fence post. He told himself trespasser. Kids, maybe. They got out there sometimes. He was supposed to call it in. He reached for the radio again. The figure moved. Not toward the camera. It stepped sideways, off the walkway. Gerald lurched out of his chair. He watched the screen. The walkway was empty. He waited 30 seconds, a minute. The walkway stayed empty. He switched between camera feeds, nothing on any of them. He sat back down slowly. Here's where Gerald made his first mistake. He didn't call it in. He told himself he'd misread the image. The resolution was terrible. Could have been a shadow, a bird. He was tired. He'd been working nights for 6 years, and sometimes at 3 in the morning, the brain starts manufacturing things. He went back to his crossword. At 4:15, there was a knock on the door. Not a bang, not a rattle, a knock. 3 clean, deliberate taps, the kind of knock you make when you know the person inside is awake. The monitoring room had one exterior door. It faced the main lot, 100 meters from the eastern walkway, 150 from the tanks. There was a window beside the door, frosted over on the outside from the cold. Gerald sat very still. He didn't answer. The knock came again. Same rhythm, 3 taps, patient, unhurried. He got up. He crossed to the window. He wiped a palm-sized clear spot on the condensation with his sleeve, and he looked outside. The lot was empty. The sodium lights showed nothing but his truck and 100 meters of empty pavement. He stood there for a long moment. Then he went back to his desk. He sat down. He picked up his crossword. He stared at 7 across. What the forgotten carry? At 5:50 a.m., first light beginning to gray the windows, he did his final walk. He needed to check the eastern tanks. He told himself very firmly that he was going to do his job. He told himself he was a grown man of 51 who had been doing this job for 6 years, and he was not going to be run out of his routine by a camera shadow and a sound that was probably geese. He walked out. The facility looked the way it always looked in early morning, gray and industrial and quietly enormous. His breath came out in clouds. His boots crunched on frost. He turned on the eastern walkway. He walked. The broken floodlight was overhead. He passed under it. His own flashlight cut ahead of him into the section of walkway beyond. The grating was covered in a thin skin of ice. He took careful steps. At the halfway point, he stopped. There was something on the walkway ahead of him. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape on the metal grating. He crouched down and shone his light at it. 2 handprints, facing the wrong direction. Palms down on the grating, but with the fingers pointing back towards him, towards where he'd come from, as if someone had been crawling away from him, towards the far end of the walkway, dragging themselves backwards. And they had been wet. The prints had frozen there in the thin ice, perfectly preserved. They were very large. Gerald stood up. He shone his light to the far end of the walkway. He didn't see anything. Then he turned around. He walked back. He did not run. He's very clear about that. He did not run. He walked briskly, steadily, and he did not look behind him. He got back to the monitoring room, and he sat down, and he waited for the day shift to arrive. And when they arrived, he said the eastern floodlight was out, and he went home. He never worked the night shift at Millhaven Road again. He took a desk job, and when people asked him why, he'd say he was getting too old for the hours. But sometimes, when someone asks him what the forgotten carry, he gets very quiet, and he changes the subject, because the answer is 7 letters, and he finally figured it out. Regrets.
Story 2, Room 11. My grandmother had a rule about the room at the end of the upstairs hall. Room 11, she called it, though the house didn't have 11 rooms. It wasn't even a proper room. It was more of a large storage space, maybe 12 feet by 10, with a low ceiling and a single window that faced the back field. She kept it locked. Not with a padlock, not with anything dramatic, just a key on her key ring, a small brass one that she never explained. She had a lot of rules, my grandmother. Shoes off at the door, no singing at the dinner table, never open an umbrella inside. The usual old country superstitions you hear from women of her generation. So when she said, "Don't go in that room," I filed it under the same category as "Don't whistle after dark and throw the spilled salt over your left shoulder." I grew up in that house, summers mostly. My parents would drop me and my sister there from June through August, which I think was less about us bonding with our grandmother and more about my parents having a functional summer. My grandmother's name was Vera. She was a small, dry, practical woman who grew tomatoes and watched the news every evening with the volume too loud and had absolutely no patience for nonsense. She was not a fearful person. That's what I want you to understand. Vera was the least fearful person I have ever known. She'd lived through things that would have broken most people, immigrated alone at 19, lost her husband young, raised 4 children on almost nothing, buried one of them. She had a toughness that wasn't aggressive, just deeply bedrock fundamental. Nothing shook her, except that room. My sister Nadia noticed it first. She was 15 the summer I'm thinking of, and I was 12, and we had that particular sibling dynamic where she thought I was a pest, and I thought she was impossibly sophisticated. She was reading a lot of Gothic fiction that summer, the kind with women on cliffs on the covers, and she had decided the locked room was mysterious and romantic. "She's hiding something in there," Nadia told me one evening, very seriously, from the top bunk. "Something she doesn't want anyone to find." "Like what?" I asked. "Old love letters, or money, or," she lowered her voice, "a body." We were 12 and 15. Everything was more dramatic. The next day, Nadia found that the key was hanging on a small nail by the back door, alongside the shed key and the cellar key. She'd apparently been casing the key ring for weeks. I want to say I tried to stop her. I did not try to stop her. I was 12 and it was July, and nothing interesting ever happened. We waited until our grandmother was in the garden. Nadia took the key. We went upstairs. The door to room 11 was painted white, same as all the others. There was nothing remarkable about it. Nadia put the key in the lock and turned it, and the door opened with the quiet reluctance of something that hadn't moved in a while. Inside, nothing. That's the honest answer. It was a storage room. Boxes, old furniture under dust sheets, a bird cage with no bird, a standing lamp with a stained shade. The single window was grimy, and the afternoon light came through it in a thick yellow bar that showed the dust floating in the air. We looked at each other. Nadia looked disappointed. I looked around. "See," she said, "nothing, just junk." But I was looking at the far wall. There was a mirror there, full length in a wooden frame, leaning against the plaster, old, the kind where the silver has started to degrade and you get those dark blotches in the corners. I crossed the room to look at it, stepping over a box, moving around the lamp, and I stopped, because the mirror didn't show the room. I don't mean it showed something else. I mean it showed the room, the same boxes, the same furniture, the same dusty light, but subtly, wrongly. The birdcage was on the left side of the room. In the mirror, it was on the right. The window was behind me. In the mirror, it appeared to be to my left. I stood there trying to work out the angles. Mirrors reverse things, obviously. Left becomes right. But the geometry was wrong in a way I couldn't quite. The window should have appeared behind my reflection because it was behind me. It appeared to my reflection's left. I said, "Nadia, come look at this." She came over. She looked. "What?" "The reflection is wrong. It's just an old mirror. It's warped or something." She looked at herself, tucked her hair behind one ear. Her reflection tucked its hair behind the other. She stopped. She took her hand away from her hair. Her reflection kept its hand at her ear for a moment longer. We both saw it. I know we both saw it because of what Nadia did next. She grabbed my wrist very hard, and she walked backward out of the room, pulling me with her. and she relocked the door and put the key back on the nail, and she never mentioned it again. Not that day, not ever. I tried to bring it up once, years later, when we were adults. She said she didn't remember it. She said it like she meant it. No flicker of recognition, no careful neutrality. She'd either convinced herself it hadn't happened, or she'd buried it somewhere she couldn't access anymore. I asked my grandmother about the room once, only once. I was careful about how I did it. I didn't mention the mirror, didn't mention that I'd been inside. I just asked her what was in that room. She was shelling peas when I asked. She kept shelling peas for a moment without answering. Then she said, "Things that should stay quiet." What does that mean? She looked up at me, Vera, who was unshakable, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. It means don't go in there, and don't look at what's in there, and don't let it look back. I was 12. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said, "Okay," and she went back to her peas. She died 6 years later. The house went to my uncle, who sold it to a developer. The whole thing was demolished in 2009. I drove past the plot once. There's a subdivision there now. Nice houses, good school district. I wonder sometimes about the mirror, whether the developer's crew found it, moved it, sold it, whether it's sitting in an antique store somewhere with a price tag on it. And I think about what my grandmother said, don't let it look back. Because here's the thing about a mirror that shows the wrong reflection. The question you have to ask isn't, what's wrong with the mirror? The question is, whose reflection is it?
Story 3. The Hikers on Burnt Ridge Trail. This is not my story. I want to be upfront about that. This happened to a woman named Dana Kessler. Dana Kessler Obi now. She got married in 2019. And I'm telling it because she told it to me, and because she said, and I'm quoting her directly, "I don't want to tell it anymore, but I need it to be told." Do you know what I mean? I did know what she meant. Some things need a witness, even if they can't be explained. So, Dana Kessler, September 2017. She and 2 friends, her college roommate Priya and Priya's boyfriend, a guy named Cal, went on a 4-day backpacking trip in the mountains. I'm not going to name the exact location because Dana asked me not to. What I'll say is it was a moderately difficult trail, backcountry but not remote, well documented with a decent trailhead and a trail register and 3 designated campsites. They'd all done this before, not together but individually. They weren't novices. Priya had done multi-week trips. Cal had his wilderness first responder certification. Dana was the least experienced of the 3, but she'd done half a dozen overnight trips, and she was physically fit, and she'd done her research. Day 1 and 2, fine, better than fine. The weather was good, the foliage was at peak, they made good time, they camped at the 2nd designated site, they ate their freeze-dried meals and drank their filtered water and played cards by headlamp and slept well. Nothing to report. Day 3 is where the story starts. They were hiking a section of the trail called Burnt Ridge. It runs along the spine of a ridgeline for about 4 miles, exposed with steep drop-offs on either side. The trail is clear and well-maintained. It's harder than the lower sections, but there's nothing technically demanding about it. You're out in the open. You can see for miles in good weather. About a mile into Burnt Ridge, they came around a bend in the trail and found a man sitting on a rock. He was maybe 60, well-equipped, good rain jacket, proper boots, a large pack leaning against the rock beside him. He didn't look like he was in distress. He was just sitting there, looking out at the valley below the ridge. They said hello. Hikers always say hello. He turned and he said hello back, and he smiled, and he looked fine, normal. He had the kind of face you immediately trust, open, lined, cheerful. They stopped. They asked if he was okay. He said he was just taking a rest, catching his breath. He said the ridge always takes it out of him. He spoke in the easy, familiar way of someone who knows a trail well. Cal asked him which direction he'd come from. The man pointed back the way Dana's group had come, back down toward the lower section of the trail. Cal said, "Huh,
because they'd been on that section all morning and hadn't seen him. The man shrugged and said he must have gotten an early start. He asked them where they were headed. They said the third campsite, another 6 miles. He said that was good. That was a fine site. He'd camped there many times. He said, "Keep to the main trail on the north face. There's a section about 2 miles out where it looks like there's a shortcut, a scramble that cuts the switchbacks. Don't take it." Cal asked why. The man paused. Then he said, "Because there's something on that part of the slope that doesn't like people taking shortcuts through it." Dana said, "Something like what?" The man looked at her. He kept smiling, but something shifted slightly. "Promise me you'll stay on the trail," he said. They said they would. They thanked him. They moved on. They talked about him as they hiked. Cal thought he was one of those old trail veterans who collects good advice and dispenses it solemnly. Priya thought he was a little odd. Dana wasn't sure. She kept thinking about the way he'd said it. Not something on the slope, but it, like he knew what the something was. 2 miles later, they found the scramble. He was right. It did look like a shortcut, a bare, rocky slope cutting diagonally up the hillside, bypassing 2 long switchbacks. It would save maybe 40 minutes. Cal looked at it. "We said we wouldn't," Priya said. Cal said that guy was just being old and cautious. "We said we'd stay on the trail." Dana was the tiebreaker. She said, "Stay on the trail." She wasn't sure why exactly. She wasn't superstitious. She was an engineer. She had a very literal, empirical relationship with the world. But something about the man's certainty sat in her chest in a way she couldn't quite shake. Cal was annoyed, but they stayed on the trail. They reached the third campsite in the late afternoon. They set up. They cooked. As it got dark, they talked about the old man again. Priya, who had a habit of reading the trail register at each campsite, pulled out the small weathered notebook that was hanging in a waterproof bag from the shelter post. She flipped through the recent entries, hikers' names, dates, comments. She read out a few. Then she stopped. She said, "When did that guy say he got an early start?" Cal said, "He implied this morning. Why?" Priya showed them the register. The last entry before theirs was dated 3 days ago. A group of 4, different names, none of them familiar. No solo hiker. No one else had signed the register. "He might have forgotten," Cal said. "Lots of people don't sign." "Okay," Priya said, "but look at this." She pointed to an entry near the back of the register. It was old, the ink faded, the date barely legible. She held her headlamp close and read it aloud. It was a warning. Whoever had written it had taken the trouble to write in careful capital letters, the kind of handwriting you use when you want to make sure you're understood. "Do not take the scramble on the north face. We took it. Roy would not have wanted us to go back for him. If you see an old man on Burnt Ridge resting on a rock, please, God, keep walking." The date on the entry was 1987. Dana told me she and Priya sat with that for a long time. Cal kept saying there was a rational explanation. Maybe someone wrote it as a joke back in '87, and it was just an eerie coincidence that they'd encountered an old man. Maybe it was a copycat entry, someone who'd read the old entry and decided to describe a similar thing. Trails accumulate folklore. Dana said she went along with that. She agreed with Cal out loud. She helped build the explanations. She ate her dinner and she slept. But she told me, "I knew." The way he looked at me when I asked him what it was. He wasn't warning us to protect us from something. He was warning us because he didn't want us to walk through where he was. He didn't want us to find out what was on that slope. She paused when she told me that. Then she said, "The worst part is that I don't actually know what it is. I don't know if he was a ghost or something that looked like a ghost or something else entirely. I don't know why he sits there. I don't know what he did in 1987 or what happened to Roy or why someone taking the scramble is a problem for whatever is on that slope." She said, "Not knowing is actually fine. Not knowing I can live with." "Then what's the hard part?" I asked her. She looked at me and she said, "I know that he knew my name." I didn't notice it at the time. We didn't introduce ourselves. But when we were leaving, I was the last one past him. He said, "Have a good hike, Dana." And I said, "Thank you," and I just kept walking. I didn't even register it until we were a quarter mile down the trail, and by then I wasn't going back to ask him how he knew. She said, "I'm glad I didn't go back." And then she got up and refilled her coffee, and we talked about other things for the rest of the evening. She never went back to that trail. She said she never will. And I think the reason she wanted the story told, the reason she needed a witness, is the same reason I'm telling you now. Because somewhere there is still a man sitting on a rock on Burnt Ridge, and he already knows your name.